Hello, hello, hello. Borderline podcast disordarians. Hope you're good. Hope you had a good week and weekend. And yeah, and just hope everything is it's well for you. It's um, it's okay for me. Just wanted to give you a little update because of the backlog of like interviews that I've managed to make. And because loads of the people that I've interviewed are going out to either the Edinburgh Fringe, or they have some of the comedians, but then also some of um, the fellow artists and guests on the podcast. They have either plays or shows or anything like that coming up throughout the summer. I will be posting more regularly, maybe twice a week, or again, I will try. Probably you'll see a lot of Monday episodes, and then maybe a Thursday one, and then Monday again, and stuff like this. And yeah, don't panic. It's because again we got loads of people who really wanted to be a part of this and came on the podcast, and yeah, we just wanna get it out there. Want you to listen and to enjoy, and loads of them are just very good. I mean, all of them. If I say so, the screening process to to get on, it's not easy. Um, but yeah, how have I been? Well, not. I think mentally good. I've looked after myself quite well. I use a lot of love and kindness. I use um oh God, I forgot the word of it. Where the acceptance, radical acceptance, a lot, because I've been um quite ill in the past week. I have seen a few doctors, and it was hard. I've seen a neurologist, and I've got something to help me out with the migraines. But the problem is that the acid reflux problem that I have, it's back. It feels worse, at times, especially this week. I don't remember a day when I didn't feel like I just wanted to throw up. And I've got a couple of tests. I think as we speak, or as you're listening to this, if you're listening on Monday when the episode is being released, I am in hospital doing a procedure which sounds terrible, as in very unpleasant. And I'll be sedated for it, so we'll see how that goes. However, although it's sad, and it makes me annoyed, and I'm a bit just tired of this, is the way it is. It's the way it is. It's the way it goes. I can't really, there is no alternative really, and it's not that there is no alternative. I can't think of anything else, because all I care about is to, and try and get myself better, and be out gigging again, because there are some really cool things happening, and I've got some wonderful shows to be a part of later this summer. So yeah, loads of things to look forward to. So that's why I just kind of want to get this done with. Um, Pickle and Sarma are doing really well, and they're just like running around, just being kids, and yeah, it's wonderful. That's also good, and they've been such a ray of sunshine, through in our lives, and we love them very much. And I don't think they love us as much. I mean, I think Sarma does, but Pickle seems like she doesn't. But that's okay. Maybe um, that's just the way she is, and that's okay. We are very accepting, and not only accepting, but she can be however she wants to be, because she is wonderful. And I think with this, I'm going to leave you on with my next with this week's guest. She's a brilliant comedian, and she's also working on some podcasts and some projects of her own. And when she said yes to this, it was really pleasant. It was not pleasant, but it was incredible. It was really it was great. I was so happy to have her say yes and be around. And Allison, Allyson June Smith, she is based in Manchester. Um, well, funnily enough, we haven't crossed paths when we were in Manchester. We actually haven't met in person, but um, I've seen some of her work, whatever it can be found online, and I've also listened to a few episodes of her podcasts, and she seemed like a lot of fun. She seemed great, and then and then I got to ask her to come in this podcast, and she did, and you know what, she is fun. She's great. She has such a good chat. She's such a nice person, and just so lovely talking to her. And I will let you listen to the conversation, and yeah, we'll see how you find it. I'm sorry that I have to be a part of it, uh, but yeah, enjoy the episode. Okay, I'll catch you later.
It's amazing. So, hello, Alison. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm in a corner of my bedroom now, actually, because we get some work done in the flat, so I have to find the quietest of spaces. But besides of that, it's all good. Yeah. And you? How's
I'm
like
good.
nice gigging?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah, gigging this weekend is a busy one, so that's great. I got 2 tonight and 3 tomorrow night, so it's a nice busy weekend. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Where is it? Is it all in Manchester, or are you traveling out for a bit?
Yeah, I'm traveling just on the outskirts, so not that far. So tonight is I'm going to Liverpool for the first gig, and then I'm going to Cheadle, which is just outside of Manchester for the second gig. So that's local to me basically. And then tomorrow night is I have 1 in Manchester and then 2 in Liverpool. So just Liverpool, Manchester area for the next 2 days, which is nice. The last couple of weeks, it's been nice to be at home in my own bed. You travel so much for work in this industry that sometimes it's just nice to be at home a little bit.
How do you find it? Like, again, gigging all over, basically, traveling like all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, you get used to it. It's part of the job, right? And I do really like it. Look, I feel very fortunate because in Canada, look, it's such a big country and it's beautiful and wonderful and I love my home country of Canada. But this country is so great in that you can travel to so many places in such a short amount of time, although people think 3 hours is a long period of time, but to me I'm like, that's a short amount of time compared to Canada. Um, so I love it. So I do love traveling. I feel I'm very fortunate with this job that I get to like see so many different places. And because I've been around for long enough now that a lot of the people that I work with, it's like I get to see pals. Like there's at least one person on the show every show that I do that is like a true mate. So I feel very fortunate with my job. That is the life I get to lead, which is not what I had planned in my life. So I'm really grateful that is my life now.
Oh, well, okay. What did you plan?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, look, we all make plans and life is gonna be what it's gonna be. When I was younger, like starting off, like let's say middle school, high school, I was a drama kid, right? So I was a drama geek. So I did love live performance. I wanted to be an actress. That was the goal. Um, and then I became a drama teacher for a period of time. I really had no intention on being a stand-up comedian. That was not in my like I had never. But then when I became a teacher, I didn't want to let myself down in pursuing my dream, right? So I was like, okay, you're going to be a teacher, but the truth is what you always wanted to be was an actress or a live performer. So at that time I thought, well, what is something that I can do that doesn't require me to be cast in something? Because this is where I think we hit the block as performers, is that a lot of times it's in everybody else's hands what we are given the opportunity to do. So I went, oh well, stand up comedy, it strikes me as though what I have to do is I have to be funny. I have to do the writing. Then I go try and sell that. And it just seemed more of like an actual way for me to be a live performer. And so I just tried it. And then when I found it, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that this was my calling. Like I didn't even, which I always say to people, look, you never know what's going to happen. You got to trust your gut and always be taking chances and always be looking for the thing that will make you happy, because the thing that you're supposed to be doing is maybe right around the corner. But sometimes we're just a little afraid to like take the chances that will lead us to the thing that is meant to be the thing we're doing. Yeah.
This sounds incredible in the regard of, oh, I want to do something, but then I kind of not stumbled, but I chose stand up because it sounds like you have like in a sense a very linear way of like, okay, how do I perform in front of people, and it's not about, like you said, being casted or going through all
Yeah.
these things. How do I just put my work out there, and that's how you do it. And it's just incredible because I think most of the people that I kind of talk with, they are usually, oh, I like stand up. And that's, it's kind of like that's the main thing, or like, oh, my hero is so and so and so. I'm just gonna start doing stand up and try to follow that path. So it's so incredible how, I guess, you were like, oh, yeah, again, the vision behind it, it's wonderful. So, and did you start in UK or did you start in Canada, and then when did you move over?
So I moved to the UK about 11 years ago. I started in Canada. So I've been doing stand up comedy now for 23 years. I know. Oh my God. I started when I was 12, everyone. So young. Yeah, no, I started in Canada, and then progressed in Canada, and then just got to a point, again, my lovely home country of Canada that I love with all my heart and soul. But for a live entertainer, it's not the best country because it's so big and we don't have the population. We also have no celebrity system because we are swallowed up by the United States of America, and everything comes out of the States and all TV. So there's very little opportunity. So you do find a glass ceiling at a certain point. And so for me, I was just like, okay, I'd started in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Then I moved to Vancouver for a couple years. Then I moved to Toronto. And then I was like, well, what now? Like, what do I do? And I was cleaning my apartment in Toronto, and my British passport that I had gotten years before without any real intention of coming to the UK to do comedy fell on the ground. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have a British passport. So I thought, well, maybe I'll look into the UK and see what it's like. And thus, here I am now, still 11 years later. Yeah.
Wow. And then
Yeah.
I imagine since you moved to the UK, have you been around gigging like outside of England as well, as in like in Europe mainland or?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the other beautiful thing about being here is that I've been able to go to so many other places. I really hope Brexit doesn't stop that, everyone. But it's so beautiful to be able to travel from here. So, I mean, from here, I've been to Singapore, Cambodia, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Europe, like, Sweden, I'm trying to think about lots of European places, Amsterdam, Helsinki. I mean, so many places that I never would have from Canada. I mean, it might have, but it would have been a lot more effort to find the connections, to find the way. So I think being here really is a better platform to performing in the world, the rest of the world.
With the traveling, do you, because you were saying before, like now, for example, you go to a gig and you bump into a mate, usually, or
Yeah.
it's a nicer way to connect with old pals. But then, how much of the traveling that you do now, it's like how much is work and how much is like how much time do you have basically? Say, look, when you travel somewhere, what does the schedule look like?
I think it all depends on, where you're going. So like, something like this, it's a local gig. So I'll go to my gigs tonight. Um, but I would say a lot of this is what's interesting. And I'm glad you asked this question because a lot of people say, oh, you only perform for like 20 minutes a night or 30 minutes a night or an hour a night. But that's not what I get paid for. The way that I look at it is I love doing stand-up. I love being on stage. That part I love. It's my zen. It's the only time in my life where nothing else can bother me because all I can focus on is that moment, right? It's all the other stuff that I get paid for. It is the travel, which can be hours, which can be being on a plane, being on trains. That is the work part to me. But it's also good too because I that's where I catch up sometimes on like films, or I do a bit of writing, so I try to do a bit of work while I'm traveling as well. But yeah, a lot of my life is in transit. A lot of my life is moving, whether it be car, train, bus, plane. It's go, go, go. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you actually write on, or like you catch up with admin work, I guess, because I know, I mean, that category where it's like love comedy, hate admin. And
Mhm.
I just want to like print it on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's a lot of comedy. I mean, you didn't think that it would be, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my god, it's invoices and looking for money and balancing accounts," and, that is it. So a lot of the times my travel time is where I'll do that stuff. Also, I'm a big planner. I love planning. I find I prefer my life when I know what I'm going into. So, like, I have a weekly. So on Sunday, what I do is I look at my week and I plan out my week and I go like, okay, these are the places I'm going. These are the time frames I'm going to have to leave. These are my travel arrangements. And then I even plan day to day. I like going into my next day kind of knowing like, okay, up at this time, first thing is at this time, I'll probably eat this at this time. Like people laugh at me. My friends are like, you are ridiculous. But I prefer going into a day with kind of a game plan, So I do a lot of planning when I'm traveling as well because I have the time to kind of think about, okay, what does my next week look like? Or what do I need to, although sometimes I think I get caught up in planning so much rather than goal setting. That's something I need to work on. That's, setting goals. But yeah, so I like to plan. I like to organize. Yeah. So that's what I do a lot of my time.
That's interesting. And then my follow-up question is, how do you feel about, because I find, uh, from my, again, very short, comedy career, that things usually, or more, no, I'd say probably 80% of the time they don't go to plan. How do you feel about that? How does that impact you? Like, if it does in any way, like how do you overcome that when you're like, oh, this is not going the way I wanted to. However, how do you start from scratch, or what do you do, or how do you manage it basically?
Yeah, I just rejig the next plan. I just go, okay. And I try to learn like I've gotten really good at realizing like I could plan my day and list 27 things, but the odds are I'm going to do 3. So now I just try to stick to 3 main things that I need to accomplish that day. Um and if something doesn't get done, it's not the end of the world, but things have priority, like if something is due on Thursday, it doesn't get done on Monday. Okay, well, we rejig Tuesday. So that becomes priority on Tuesday. I like to give myself a lot of heads up. So in my calendar, I'll have like, if something is due by Thursday, I'll start reminding myself on Monday. Don't forget that this Tuesday is like, okay. So it's like, it gives me some real, this is the last day. Like, you got to get this in order. So often I plan, things don't always go to plan, but at least I have an idea of like, okay, that thing is priority this week. It has to be done by this time. And I look at my schedule and go, okay, I'm going to be traveling a lot. So I should think about this thing maybe Sunday, even though it's not due till Thursday. That way, during the travel time, I know what my focuses are. I've always been like that. Even as a child, the moment I learned about a day planner and a schedule, it just kind of changed my world. Otherwise, I feel like, and there are some times I don't necessarily totally plan. I take breaks, but for me, I prefer knowing what I'm going into. Yeah, yeah.
Now, sometimes I spoke with other people. For example, I think when I was chatting with Ali Woods a few months ago, he was talking about how, when you work for yourself, because for example, like I'm in a position where I still have a part-time job during the day to make sure that I get.
Keep it
However,
for as long as you can. Don't you let go of that part. Honestly, if I could say one thing to comedians or any self-employed person, If you can have more than one stream of income coming in and something that is consistent, if you can make it work with your dream, keep that for as long as you can, because why wouldn't you want to make that money? It
Yeah.
gives you the money to do the things you want to do. Now, the time will come where it's like, okay, I want to do more of this. I don't have the time for this job. You'll reach that time. But I always say, especially young comics, I'm like, what's the hurry? You're still a comedian. You don't have to abandon all that other money. That money will give you the opportunity to maybe fund yourself to go travel to a different place to do shows, to go see what it's like somewhere else. That's benefiting you. So I always tell people, keep all those streams of income coming as long as it doesn't interfere with your dream. Why wouldn't you? You know?
For sure, and it sounds good. That's what I'm like. Oh yeah, I sometimes I think about it and I'm like, maybe it's time to, but then no. But I was wondering, like, how do you? Sorry, so my question was, you obviously work for yourself, so you're kind of like, again, you're your own manager, your own everything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take days off, as in, like, because that was the what I was going earlier. So basically, Ali was saying about this thing where, like, even on his days off, or like, because I do the same thing. Even on my days off, I still do some things. Like, for example, today to me would have been a day off where actually, I still work for a couple hours, because I otherwise I will be sitting on a couch, or I will be, I don't know, doing whatever, thinking about stuff that has to be done. So
Yeah.
how do you manage that? Like, do you actually take, say, a period of, like, okay, that's my day off, or those are my 2 days off, or do you take time off during the day?
Yeah, I think for me it all depends on, and that is the hard part of being a self-employed person, is that I think even your days off you are still thinking about, because nobody else is doing it for you, you know. Even if you have an agent or even if you have a manager, it is still you that is propelling whatever it is you want forward. So that is the hard thing. Um like this week and last week has been nice because I only had shows on the weekend. So to me, that was almost like 2 weeks of like, oh, but even as the days come up, then it's like I say yes to podcasts, or I've got to do my own podcast, or a little bit of research for the next week for the podcast. So there are some days where I will go, okay, today you're going to take it easy. But I do still find myself booking a train or doing, just because those things are always on my mind. But I guess as far as I feel, if I'm not leaving the house, that's a day off. Even if I'm still doing admin, I'm like, "Ooh, I get to be at home." But I do feel, I mean, I always say this to people, and I need to work on it. Time off is as important. And so sometimes I do schedule, like, today is a day where you get to choose whatever it is you want to do. So I'll put, like, Tuesday is your day. So do you want to deal with your plants? Do you want to paint that thing in the garden? I try to give myself those days where I'm still doing things, but it's as I want to do it. It's not on a schedule. It's not on so for me, I try to do that. But I do always find myself doing something, right? Sending an email to somebody or looking at gigs, always looking for gigs, because that's another thing too. And I currently I have an agent who is lovely. She's wonderful. Her name is Jessica Toomey, Fab Management. But she and I have started to work together now. And so for many years, I was finding my own gigs. So I've always been my own gig hunter. I've always been the person doing my own work. Yeah, a lot of people feel that it's up to agents to do that, and I'm sure it is. If you got a great agent, that's awesome. But not all of us get to have an agent that can get us all the gigs. And that does not mean you are a bad comedian, or that does not mean you are, it just means that, look, there's more comedians than there are agents. So if you're on your own, it is up to you to be constantly looking at gigs. Like, I remember I worked one time with Scott Capurro, who is a wonderful comedian, a wonderful comedian. And we met for lunch. We were gigging in, oh God, where were we? It was somewhere in Europe. Was it Malmo? Might have been Malmo. And he was like, I applied for 3 gigs this morning, so that's my work done. And I was like, oh yeah. So I always am looking at the forums, looking for what's available and applying for gigs. And I say that to my fiance, who is also a comedian, but he still has a day job. And sometimes he laughs at me because he's like, I don't know if I have the same drive as you. He goes like, you get up, you check the forums, you apply for gigs, and that is just instinctual for me at this point. A little bit easier now that more people are coming to me, which is great. But I still believe it is always us. It is up to us. That is the beauty of stand-up comedy, is it's ours. No one can take it away from you. Yeah.
That's a very interesting, that's such a beautiful analogy, or like such a beautiful thing to say about the, it's in our powers. Because I think sometimes in many aspects of life, I used to be the sort of, and I think sometimes, no, actually, I would say not as much at the moment. We're like, oh, it's out of my control. Like, you can't, I can't do this. What can I do? But then when you're like, actually, you do whatever you can in your control. Like you said,
Mhm.
I do sometimes. I don't know how you feel about it, but like sometimes when I go through the forums to like look for gigs, I beat myself up sometimes, and I'm like, there was a message from like 3 days ago about this gig. I should have sent the email 3 days ago, and then I just like get really angry with myself about it.
Yeah. Well, don't get angry with yourself. You can't beat yourself up. All you got to do is make that mental note and go, okay, from now on, I'm just going to apply immediately. If I see that gig, I'm going to do it right then and there. It's got to be so instinctual that you almost forget. Like you got to apply, send the email, and then forget you did. It's like an audition. You do the audition, you walk away from it, and you got to just not think about it again. So I am instinctually just always looking for gigs, applying for a gig, moving on, looking for another gig, moving on. If one out of every 6 that I apply for comes through, then that's great, right? I got a gig. So yeah, but again, I'm a very like, I've always had to be that way because in Canada, we didn't have that opportunity. In Canada, I worked for Yuck Yucks. The way it works is you work for Yuck Yucks or you're an independent comic. That's it. If you work for Yuck Yucks, you can't do any of the other independent gigs. For many years, there weren't that many other independent gigs. So I've never been in a free market comedy-wise. The UK was a free market. I could work for anyone anywhere. And so I think that was a real inspiring thing for me. Whereas for so many years, it was Yuck Yucks saying, here's the gig we have for you. Here's the gig we have for you. And so to come to a country where it was like, I could just find gigs, like I could just go look for them was such a, it just made me so hungry. And I loved the ability to do that for myself. And so the agent I have now, I would almost say she's more of a manager. We look for like I'm doing my own tour now, which is something I've never done before because, I've been going a long time, but I don't have TV. I'm not a known name. So I always thought a tour, but now with podcasts, now with social media, there's so many other ways to find your audience and have them come to see you. So she's been the one who's kind of like, let's do a tour. So she sets things up above and beyond what I already have in place. That's when I think you need someone. But you have to create your own base. You have to have your own thing that you're like, no matter what, I can perpetuate myself forward. And I think that's even beyond comedy. That is life. You have to be perpetuating yourself forward and finding opportunities. Denzel Washington, sometimes for motivation, I like to listen to graduation speeches, like in the mornings, like I'll listen to like a university graduation speech. And he said this one thing that I've never forgotten. So when I became a teacher, I was disappointed in myself because I felt like that was the fallback plan, right? I became a drama teacher. Oh, it's the fallback plan. And Denzel Washington said, everyone was like, well, what's your fallback plan? And he's like, I never understood that. If I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall forward. I'm not going to fall back. I'm going to fall forward. And I loved that so much because I was like, yeah, shit's not always going to go to plan, but that's okay. And that perpetuates you. So like you said before, you're like, oh, I beat myself up because I didn't apply for that gig. Well, now you're going to apply for that gig quick. You're going to have an automated little thing on your notes on your phone that you can just plug it in and then just put in you know what I mean? And be like, here, I saw this offer. I would love to apply for this gig. Put in the details. Boom. You find systems then to help you fall forward a bit more.
I do, this is the thing from when I started as well. I looked into gigs who like say they book on a certain day throughout the year. Now I've started setting up reminders on the day before, and as soon as like it hits midnight, I would send the email, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I done it. And but yeah, like I had to learn it because I would apply for it at like the random days when I would just remember, and I'd be like, I never get a reply. So you know what? I would look into it and they say, oh, do it on like 1st of December. I'd make sure that on the 30th of November,
Yeah.
I had the reminder saying for the 1st of December, send that email. And it worked, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm
I
very
love a
happy.
reminder. I love a reminder. I know this is just an audio, but like I'll show you, like, for example, I like visuals. So like here's an example of how, so my calendar has color coded systems on it. So it's like red is like, don't forget you have to do that thing. Green is you're making money. Pink is like, you're going to be someplace for a period of time. Yellow. So to me, I can look at a calendar real quick and be like, okay. And I set reminders, I set alarms, even like months in advance, like you did, right? So like on November on this date, I'm going to set the alarm. So then oh yeah, I got to do that thing today. Yeah, it is all just about organization. I mean, you look, I'm not saying everything goes to plan, everyone, but I do try to develop some systems. So yeah.
I think it's nice when it feels like, you know what, in the end of the day, you're in control as much as possible, at least, because
Yes.
yeah, I do get that energy. But you were saying earlier about working on the first on your tour. How does it feel?
Look, it's such a different experience because I've been doing stand up for 23 years now, and I mainly work clubs, right? I do a lot of corporates, I do other things, but clubs. So I'm usually one of 4 people on a bill. So I have really grown up in the skill of like getting to a place, selling my wares, getting them to buy into what it is I'm selling. I have not experienced until now people being there going, "We already like what you're selling, just give it to us." Like not having to like convince them, like you will like this, like you're going to get no. So it's really magical, especially when you get people who truly love you. It's like you can say things, you can take time, you can do jokes that maybe I couldn't do at other places. So for me, it has been such an affirming experience, like personally, to think that people are coming because they have already bought into what I am and who I am and what I do, and they like it. It's I mean, I've never felt it before. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And it just yeah, yeah. Instead of having to convince, they're already convinced. Yeah, that's magical, I think, for a performer.
I
All these
think
people who get to do tours who have had that all their comedy career, my God, like what an amazing skill. That being said, I'm very proud of the fact that I've done it the way I've done it. I'm very proud that I can go to any environment and figure out how to sell my wares. I think some people don't learn that skill. They're so good at designing their own shows and their own following. So for me, I have enjoyed the process of like, okay, new environment, new room. Let's do it. Let's see what this is like here. Yeah.
I mean, nice. I mean, this is actually working very well because it leads on what I was going to ask you next, which was, you moved from first from like you're saying Quebec,
Calgary,
right?
Alberta,
Calgary,
Canada.
sorry, Calgary. I'm
Mhm.
so sorry.
No, no, it's
Yeah. So
fine.
you moved like from Calgary to what was it, Vancouver and then Toronto, or was it the other way
Yes.
around? And
No,
then from
Vancouver
that,
and Toronto.
to London, and then from London to Manchester. You've done all these moves, so it goes on what you were saying now about you go and you like try to basically make whatever audience that doesn't know say who you are before you go on stage, you make them go on your side. But obviously in your situation you've actually been on like all these separate scenes almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like for you? Like what were like the changes? Like how did you feel about it? First moving from your home city to a new city, and then moving to another, and then going, like, oh, actually, I'm gonna go on a whole different continent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I had never, again, it wasn't something that I had ever really planned on doing. And I was scared that first move. And I really owe a comedian. Her name is Jen Grant. She's from Canada. She's a great comic, and she was really my support in that first move, because the only reason I moved is because I had my heart broken. Let's be honest, people, heartbreak is what, makes us fall forward every single time. You learn from everything. So it was my first big heartbreak, and I wanted to like do something different, and I needed to, and I was ready to kind of step away from teaching. And she was like, "Why don't you move to Vancouver? I think it's time to move to Vancouver. I'll find us an apartment. You should just come to Vancouver." And I was so scared. Like, I remember still like, okay, okay. And like left teaching, went to Vancouver and started to do comedy. And Vancouver is very much like a Brighton. So it was very like more politically correct, very, very I hate using the word woke because I think we are just woke people in general. But like it was a different, and so the first time I got there and I started to do comedy in a different, but when you leave home, that's when you start to go, oh, this is who I am. Because you also don't have that, people will always think of you the way you were when you were there at home. And to go to a new environment and be around different people and be like, okay, here's me. And they look at you and you get to present yourself the way you are at that moment. And to get the positive feedback, it was like, oh my God, like, and then to go to a different environment and be like, okay, here I am, this is me. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was also some bad feedback, but after that first move, I think the idea of different environments, I saw the importance of it for me. I saw the value that it was giving me as a person and as a comedian to be like, okay, there's nothing to be scared of. Like, they're just people. They are people. It's just a different environment. And you learn a little bit more. Like, I love being able to go to cities and be like, oh, it's a bit more like this here. Or you go to that country and you're like, oh, it's a bit more like this here. Or a place that you haven't been before, like Berlin. The first time I went to Berlin and did, comedy, I was like, "Ooh, what's this going to be like? Like, are they?" And it's just such a joy when you get to present yourself and people go, "Wow, we love that." And you're like, "Oh my God, I had no idea that people would like me in Berlin," or I had no idea. So I feel it's such an affirming thing as a human to be putting yourself, because the older and older we get too, we get afraid of change. And it's so funny because I always say to my best friend, I'm like, God, sometimes I'm not good with change. And she's like, you're not good with change. She's like, you've moved to England from Canada. You're not good with change. And I'm like, oh, well, so for me, it was just, it's so affirming to realize that the world is smaller than you think and that you can really connect with people in so many different places. Yeah, on so many different levels. So for me, it's just been affirming and positive and made me want to continue to go to different places, to do different things, to see what it's like. Because, without change or without chance, we don't grow as people. So, we can't stop that. You have to be embracing that. So I think coming from a place where I never thought I would be that person to this place now, yeah, it's been really amazing.
Where's your best friend?
My best friend is in Calgary. Her name is Jody. Yeah, she was very angry at me when I moved away from Calgary. We met in university, so we have been friends for quite some time now. But yeah, she's been there through all of it too, to see the developments and to see all the changes. And yeah, some days she's just like, I just can't believe, like, the first time when I called her from Cambodia, she's like, you're doing stand-up comedy in Cambodia. I was like, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
And has she been to? I imagine it's a yes, but I'm just gonna ask anyway. Has she been to UK since you moved here?
Yes, she came to visit me when I lived in London. She has not been able to see me since I've been in Manchester, which I feel is more really my UK home. Um, so not recently, but I go back to Canada quite a bit. I go back to Canada, I would say every 4 or 5 months. My parents are a little bit older, so I got to go keep my eye on those boomers and make sure they're doing okay. I don't have kids. They're my kids now, right? It switches roles after a while.
Are
Yeah.
they still in Calgary as well, your parents?
Yes, they're still in Calgary, so.
What's it? How do you get to Calgary? Like, how is it hard? Is it like a big commute? Or I mean, obviously it's quite far, but I'm saying, is it one airplane or do you have to change into like other?
It's 2. It used to be 1, but given the state of airlines now I usually change in Amsterdam, Schiphol. That's my
Oh.
switch off. So and even if it was London, you'd still have to go London, either Schiphol or Toronto. You switch over, but I always fly KLM. I got no problem saying that. So it's a switch now. So it's about 14 hours with a couple hour layover in
Mm.
Schiphol, and then so UK, Amsterdam, Calgary.
What was it like to your family, to your parents? For you to again not only do comedy, but then to move continents for comedy.
Yeah. Look, my parents have always been very supportive. They don't necessarily really know much about comedy. They don't really, like my mom always says, it's just not really our thing. It's not our thing. And I'm like, okay,
Bless her.
that's cool. It's not your thing. And my father, when I first started doing it, so my father is Mancunian, so he is from Manchester. So I am actually living now like 5 minutes away from where my father grew up as a child. Yeah, before he went into
Which part of Manchester?
So Hume is where he grew up. Hume, yeah. So I'm in the Moss Side area, everyone, because I like to live dangerously and I'm not afraid. So that is where I'm based. So yeah, he grew up in Hume. So I'm like, I go over to Alexandra Park, which is where he like played football as a kid, and like, so it's really interesting. So when I first started doing comedy, because he is a proper British Reserve man, he was like, "That's stupid. It's not a real job. Like, you're a teacher. That's what you do. You're a teacher. That's a job." And so like it was hard for him, and he thought I was crazy. And then the first time I went to Just for Laughs, and he was like, "They're paying for you to go? They're giving you a hotel?" And that was just Montreal. He's like, "Huh." And then I started to go to all these, and then I think eventually he just realized that like life is what you make of it, and your job is like there's other things now in life that you can do. And I think about him and his generation and how it's kind of sad, because I think there's the boomers and a couple generations after that where there was no encouragement to find what's your love and maybe make a job out of that. It was, you go find a job, you get a trade, you buy a house, I feel so lucky that I was born in a time where I could like daydream and then kind of make that daydream be a little bit of what like I wanted to be an actress. Well, I'm not exactly an actress. I do some acting, but I am a full-time live performer, like that is, yeah. And I don't think that would have happened, especially as a woman. I mean, even 20 years ago would have been like, oh, stay home. 25 years ago, like it was a bit of a battle, but yeah, now he's on board. Now he thinks it's great. He's only been to about 3 shows in my entire comedy career because it's not their thing. My mom likes to come, but I think it's just because she gets free wine at the gigs, so that's why she likes to come. Mhm.
Oh my God, it's so incredible the what you were saying. The amount of times my jaw just like drops while you talk is just I find it incredible. Um, because you were talking about this, and I do see it on. Sadly, I lost my parents. One a few like 5 years ago, my dad, and then my mom a couple of years ago. So I'm gonna say luckily, sorry. Sadly, they've never actually got to see me doing stand up, but
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, and I think it's because I was raised in Romania,
Mhm.
so everything it feels like when you talk about like 2000, it actually feels more like the 90s, when I
Yes.
talk to people here. So actually, yeah, it's wild for me, and I think I struggled with this growing up. I'm still growing, but like I struggled with this earlier, where they had to kind of, okay, how old are you? 17. Yeah, okay, pick a job, you stick
Yeah.
with it, that's it. and
Yeah.
and I was thinking about it as you were saying about how, and I don't know what was it like for example, like in Canada, but I know like in Romania you had there were a couple of like live performers on TV. Like literally, you could probably like it had like 10 or 15 people. Okay, no, couple, 10 or 15 people. You could name, like, write their names down. Those were the only people who were doing, and then for everyone else, it was unrealistic to even think that it's a thing. While now, it's so, again, it is grown so much. And
Yeah.
like you said, look, there are even people who can do it part-time. There are people who do acting and then they like double with stand-up comedy, but then there are stand-up comedians who then go into acting or into music or whatever. And
Yeah.
you can just play around with all these, even I think even the creative fields. Would you say that now it's even that's expanding? Because like now you don't have to be an artist where it's like, oh, what are you, a comedian? That done. It's more of
Yeah.
a, oh, have you tried this, or like, what do you feel about that, etc. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it gives us a lot more opportunities, It's yeah, and people see it as a viable way of living and making a living and it just wasn't it's not one of the trade jobs or one of the, but yeah, it's inspiring. And even like look what we're doing now, podcasting and putting yourself out in the world. That wasn't a thing. That wasn't a thing even 10 years ago. Really, it was, but it wasn't like it is now. Like, so I feel like there's less gatekeepers as a creative person. There are more mediums to work on. During COVID, look, when everything shut down, the world of online stand-up, like doing shows, I mean, that was something I loved that. That was a totally different medium, and I really enjoyed that process. Um, so yeah, I just feel like we have more opportunities than we've ever had before. Yeah.
Is that how your podcast is? It Woman Talking Bollocks, which
Yes,
I think
women talking bollocks. Yes, yes.
it's an incredible name. But is that how you started? Did it start because of the pandemic?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, so Jen Brister, a great comedian, Maureen Younger, great comedian. We'd always kind of toyed around with the idea, but when the pandemic hit, it was like we were all stuck at home. So we're like, okay, this is the time to start these projects. So that's what we did. We had a producer, Impatient Productions, that wanted to work with Jen, and Jen's like, well, I want to do a podcast. And they were like, great. And she's like, I want to bring these on board. Great. So that literally is how it started, and I was very grateful for that pandemic time too, because it gave me a chance to like, I don't know. I think it gave us all a chance to take a minute, whether we wanted that minute or not. We had to be with ourselves and think about, okay, well, what are some other projects I could do? What are some other things? So I'm very grateful for that time personally. Because of that, we have the podcast. Because of that, we did online shows. Because of that, like I did more corporates in Canada during the pandemic than I did when I was living in Canada, because it was like teacher groups would be like, we have a teacher conference. Can you do 45 minutes? I was like, yes, I can. And the beauty of that too is you could have your set list right beside the computer. So you didn't even have to remember. You could just like do a little cheat, look over and be like, on to the next joke while your tea is cooking in the kitchen. It was amazing. I really enjoyed that process. Yeah.
How did you adapt? Like it sounds also from someone who, because you were saying before, like how you like to plan things and to be quite like precise. How did you find to then have to plan this? Like, how did you have to? How did you feel about? I don't know. Like, I think March, whenever it was like, okay, everything is closing. What was it like?
I think I just knew that like this was just a moment in time. I knew that eventually something would happen, and things would change. But I think because I kept myself doing projects and working on things, and I still had online shows. And doing online shows was so different because it was such a different medium. Um, and it was like this, like you and I looking at each other now, that's and it actually gave me a chance to really watch myself as I was doing comedy and be like, what does my face do? What do I look like? And I think it actually probably gave me more TV preparation than actually being on TV, because I could see myself and be like, oh, if I'm delivering a joke, like it was just so much more intimate, like raise my eyebrow, tilt my head. It's such a different medium than like standing with a microphone far away from people. I was like, oh, this is up close and personal. So I loved that. And some jokes that I did during that time, they won't work on stage. Like they are only for the intimate kind of this sort of thing. So for me, I just reveled in that, and also because I had been traveling, the idea of just being able to stay home and be in my own bed for honestly, like, it was like, I think it did my circadian rhythm some good. Like, I was like, "Oh, it's my bed. I don't have no time zone changes." Like, because like, that's my life, like, going here, going there, this, that. So for a while, I almost was like, "Oh," and like, look, I should probably worry more about money than I do, but I just believe that money is the easiest thing that we make in our lives. Money is easy to make, right? Creating art, building buildings, that's hard. Money, we all know how to make money. So I try not to stress too much about money, and I just think, like, if you're always making, things are always made, money will come. People might think I'm a little airy-fairy or hokey pokey thinking that, but I do. I try not to. I think if money is what rules us, you're not gonna live a life. You're a slave to, like, we all need to make money, but to me, I was like, I always want to find a way that I don't mind making that money. So yeah, I didn't worry. I knew things would come back around. And then there was government grants, and I was like, sure, I'll live off of those. That's fine. Or my boyfriend still had his day job, so I wasn't too worried at that point. And yeah, So I just kind of took it on the chin. But that's what you got to do in this life, right? Like, as a self-employed person, anything could change at any point. So you just got to be ready to go with the flow and adapt and accept it. And you can't be angry or fight it. Then you're resisting change. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I think we had. I always think about this saying that my dad used to do it in Romanian. It sounds better, but it's basically you can't pee against the wind, and
You can't. Yeah.
and sometimes I have to remind myself that, and yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. And I think the thing about like the financial aspect as well, where I kind of I'm on the same line where I'm like, I want to make enough to have a decent life, and or like to live in within my means, and then whatever else, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's always good to see the beauty of of like everything that you're doing, rather than, oh, I have to do this because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But now I was going to ask, because I'm just so curious about, so doing again comedy, and doing comedy for these years, and doing it in so many places. Have you, if at all, like, have you? How much did you change in regards to, obviously when you started? There is all the experience that came, but how much did you change from like who you saw yourself being at first? Because I'm in here just to make sure that I'm clear about what I mean.
Mhm.
It's like, what do you? Oh, I'm gonna be a high energy, or I'm gonna be low energy, or I'm gonna be deadpan, or I'm gonna be observational. I'm gonna be a storyteller, etc. How much did you change from your first perception of what you wanted to what you are now, and like how do you deal with, I guess, the ongoing, ongoing is that word?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
continuous growing.
Yeah. I think I probably went into comedy with more of an organic nature because I hadn't anticipated being a comedian. So it's not like I could go in going like, well, I like one-liners or I'm a storyteller. I went into it so going, I don't even know what they're going to laugh at. Like the idea of a joke, like I didn't even really like set up punchline tag. Like that was not, my brain didn't work that way. So for me, it was literally just like grasping at straws. And I think because I did it that way, it was a very organic development for me. And I think that people can go into comedy going, well, this is the type of comedian that I am. But I think you gotta really, I think what's grown the most is my being able to see who I really am to the audience. Who we think we are and what the audience sees are two different things a lot of the time. And I think there's a lot of comedians out there being like, this is who I am. And I'm like, yeah, but is that what the audience sees? Like, is that really who you are? Like, and so for me, I think it was just like making, doing time. And it's like anything. You're not, what is it, 10,000 hours to get a mastery at something is what they say. So to me, it was like every time I was on stage, I learned a little something, like, okay, I got a quick joke. That's great. I got one joke. I told this story that worked well. I think for me, it's like, because I had no concept of like what kind of comedian I was going to be, I just needed to be a comedian. That, it was just trial and error, trial and error. Um, I think as time went on, I got much better at joke writing and finding jokes as opposed to like a story with a funny something in it. Um, and a really good writing technique that I found was from a girl in Canada, a very funny comedian named Nikki Payne. And she said what she did when she was starting off is she would write down, okay, so her idea, the joke or the story, and she would do it and she would start to underline where it was the audience was consistently laughing at. So if she did that thing 3 times, she'd be like, they always laugh at that. And then what she would do is go, and then I would try to like make getting to that laugh shorter. So how can I edit it down? So it wasn't even about necessarily writing a joke. It was like, where are the parts where the audience always laughs? Get to those quicker. And I think that really helped me to, because I come from an old school type of comedy, LPMs, laughs per minute, everyone, right? If that audience isn't laughing every like minute, minute and a half, you better have some big payoff at the end. And especially because I'm in clubs, like people are a little drunk, people, you got to keep their attention. So I'm all about laughs per minute, LPMs, keeping them with me. Let's, stay with me. But that was a skill that came again over time. And I think you can set out to be any type of comedian you want, but the comedian you turn into, you can't determine that. You can't make yourself a one-liner if you're not a one-liner writer, and you can't make yourself a storyteller if you're you could tell some stories or do a one-liner here and there, but I think it's just over time you go, this is who I am. And I think the more true to you that you can be on stage, like we're all animated versions of ourselves on stage, but if someone was to talk to me backstage, I like to think that it's me, like it's that person you recognize on stage. So, yeah, I think it's more just about doing it, doing it, doing it, doing it. Then you learn who you are. That's what I think anyway. Yeah.
I mean, sorry, I feel like I'm just giving feedback after every single, but yeah, it sounds amazing. That's it. Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think it's such a, again, it's all this thing about like not fighting against the wind, or it's the perception thing. It's incredible because I do find myself in positions where I speak with, and I think sometimes I used to basically, it's quite, I guess it's sad in a way, but I had this period where I was just being incredibly miserable, and I would write was just like what I thought. Oh, I'm just a dark comedian now,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then and then I watched because for example, now when I do like all my social media planning and everything, I use old videos, and then I was looking at the videos and I was like, oh my god, I kind of felt like I wish I could just go in the video and just like hug myself.
Yeah.
After you look, and it was interesting because to me I was like, oh, people don't get it. I'm just like, ha ha ha, this is like my misery is so funny. Well, now I still talk about like my misery, but I
Sure.
feel like just because it sounds more like, oh, I'm just being a bit of an idiot, which I'm comfortable with. But also, how important is it, and do you still how do you work on your stuff? Like, do you record it? Film it and then you look back at it, or do you just make the mental notes while on stage and you just go with it?
I think it all depends on the gigs. I mean, given the world of social media now, I probably record things a lot more than I did before. I will admit that. Because now it's all about content. Content is king, which I mean, that's a very different world than when I started, right? And I kind of like when I started that there was some anonymity, that you could go do a gig, say some things, walk away, done. Now it's like everything is recorded. Did you put up a clip from that show? Did you, it's a whole different, it's almost like a secondary career, which I am still trying to learn and I am not the best at. Like everyone's like, get your followers up. I'm like, oh my God. So like, that's a whole different world, right? That is to me separate from being a comedian. Being a comedian was like, get on stage, do your stuff. Now it's like, and then always, do you have the content and your Insta reels and get that is something I'm still trying to learn. Um Sorry, I got sidetracked even thinking about social media. I
It's all
completely
good.
forgot. I was like, what was the initial question? I'm so sorry.
Oh no, well, basically the question was how do you basically keep an eye on like your work, or like how do you
Right.
uh, check your work to see like where changes need doing and stuff like that?
Yes. I do feel there is a real importance of always watching yourself back or at least listening back, because sometimes you go through your set and you're like, well, I did my set like normal. Why did it go so? There's always things that we say in every show that we even forget we say, or moments that are real. So I truly believe it is a matter of watching back as much as you can. Also, choosing gigs that are more play around gigs where it's like you can take some more chances. You can do, because look, I don't believe that every gig is like, you got to have new material. I think there needs to be some consistency. Like you need to be able to go into a club and go, here's my 20 minutes. Here's 20 minutes that I know people will like. Here is, and then once you prove yourself, I think then at each place you get a bit more leeway. You play a club for a few years and they like you and it works real well, then you can take a few more chances, or and also again organically, I think things, and sometimes things just pop in my head and I'll be like, oh, I'm going to try that. Or you pay attention to like what the MC says before you go on and you go, oh, I'm going to say this based off of what they. So I think it is a real balancing act of like what will work. I'm going to try this new thing, but then also gigs where like it doesn't matter, where you are like, it's not about money. It's an open mic, or it's, a gig where they're like, bring a piece of paper up, say some things. And I think there's a beauty in that too, because I think I do a lot of my writing on stage, like in the moment, because a lot of times comedians will deliver their joke and they'll be like, I've written this thing. Let me say this thing. But often it's the thing that you say after the joke. It's the tag or it's the little throwaway that you didn't plan. That's the funny. And that's really you, because that wasn't something you constructed or thought. That was your brain reacting to that moment. There's honesty in that. So I do think it's really important to at all times record and listen, because there are so many things that we say that we don't even know we said.
I think it's when you were saying this, because I was going to say like your voice, it's really nice to listen to, by the way. So, but I sometimes find when especially when I started listening to my own videos, or I was like, oh my God, no. And I remember at some points I would just like play something, or even now, for example, where I upload a video, and then like you open TikTok, for example, and it starts playing, and then I'm just like, oh my God, stop
Oh,
this
yeah.
horrible voice, and which is mine. And
Yeah.
I was like, and I sometimes listen, I'm like, oh, this is really hard to listen, and I think that was actually one of the hardest things I had to learn through comedy, to actually
Mm-hmm.
accept listening, but especially like, yeah, with the podcast editing, where
Oh,
I have to go through it, and I'm like, oh God, no. Okay,
yeah.
I can't fast forward because I don't know. Like, I want to see there is any changes needed or whatever. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just find it
It is
hilarious, and I think
painful. It is painful. I think we all hate watching ourselves, because it's like, oh my God. Because as narcissistic as we are being comedians, we're also like, we really don't like ourselves. So it's this weird combo of like, it's all about us. And yet it's like, oh God, this is so painful. But, it's so important. And I think social media, that's a hard thing for me, is like making videos on social media just seems so weird to me. Whereas younger comedians doing social, like, hopping on and talking to camera, that's so instinctual to them. They're probably better at that than the actual being on stage and doing comedy, because again, this is something that no one can stop you from doing. You can put out videos, you can, so I think that the younger generation of comedians now, they get more time on this platform than they do actually stepping on stage and doing a set, which is interesting. So it's a generational thing. It's a technology thing. It's yeah. But no matter what, we got to get used to accepting ourselves.
well, sounds easy.
I know.
But I was now going to ask you, and this is going to be the. I'm not going to take any more of your time after this, but I'm just curious of your a perception of it. Basically, like, what do you think is the right balance between, again, social media, like, um, I guess, handling and then doing actual comedy, because or like being a stand-up comedian, because like you said, you've been a stand-up comedian for a while, then now you have to say up your, because you said something really interesting earlier, which I heard even now, for example, because I did some a little bit of work with like some showcases, and they were like, oh, you need to up your like
Mhm.
followers.
This is
And
everything now. Yeah. Yeah.
so what's your view on this whole, like, well, because in my head, and sometimes I think, if you're funny, right? Like if
Mhm.
you're a good comedian, you're a good comedian.
Mhm.
But then how do you kind of, because I've seen basically cases of people who just like exploded on social media, and then obviously you opened up some doors, but then where is the balance? Like how do basically, I think I'm asking as in, like, how do I feel like, oh, it's a fair question for me to be asked to like up my followers. Again, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that I'm ready to do
Sure.
whatever incredible shows, but yeah, how do you balance basically the whole social media game with, well, if you're a good comedian, you're a good comedian, and that should maybe matter more.
I mean, it's hard because I am in the generation of comedian where I was a comedian, right? It wasn't about finding the followers. So, I mean, I'm still trying to find my happy place with that, right? Like I, it, I don't know. Like I think it depends on where you're coming from. Look, I think if you are like me and doing the live stand up was what you have the most experience from, okay. So then the focus has got to be like, how do I? So for a period of time, I had a social media PR person that was kind of like helping me cut clips and get things out. Cost me money. It was a good thing. The problem is with these people, they're so valued now that they get paid lots of money by companies, or they're not doing that job for very long, right? So it is a hard thing because that is another aspect of things now that we have to, and look, opportunities are given to people who have social media followings more so than necessarily the experience being the comedian. I'm not going to say they're good or bad comedians, but their social media following gives them opportunities that someone who doesn't have a social media following maybe won't. Like, look at TV. I'll tell you this. I know for a fact if certain TV shows are looking for somebody, the number one thing they look at is how many followers do you have?
I
It's not about your ability. It's because TV is afraid now of losing people because everyone's on social media. So TV wants the youth and they want the numbers. And how are they getting that? Through people who have followings, bringing them to TV. It used to be TV gave us the people. Now TV needs the numbers. Agents are like, what's your following? So I feel it's like leaning even more towards social media now than it is about ability. But that's just my opinion. People can argue that. I totally respect whatever. But so for me, it's like I'm still trying to find my happy place with social media, because like, yeah, I got a podcast. Yeah, I put my clips out. I probably need to I need to find my special talk to camera thing that is my thing. So that's something that I find now, like certain comedians will have a thing, right? Where they're walking and talking, or they are commenting on a thing, or it's almost finding what's your niche, what's your sell. Um, yeah, but I mean, I also have to be grateful for it because again, social media reaches numbers that we never wouldn't have been able to find before. So, how do you find your happy place? I'm still trying to find that. I am still trying to find that. If I was a comedian starting just now, I think the way you got to go into it is 50-50. I think you got to go, here's my onstage time, I'm doing this. From that, I immediately find a clip or put out something, or because it's smoke and mirrors. Social media is also smoke and mirrors. So like it's selling your wares on a different platform, and it is being consistent. So in a way, maybe it's good because it teaches us to like, you got to always be making even more so now, like put out stuff, put out stuff. But I think the key is finding a way to do that through what you're already doing in your life. So, you know, maybe your social media clips are on your way to and from a gig, or your social media clips. Like, I have another podcast that I do about horror movies with a friend of mine. We do it a little less often. Yeah, but I love horror movies. So I'm watching horror movies already. So I'm like, hey, let's just choose a horror movie, watch it, and then we can talk about it. So it is finding the things that are kind of already a part of your life. That way you don't feel like you're having to like do this whole other thing. You're kind of taking from what it is you have. That is what I kind of think might be the key. But again, that is not my mastery. I am trying to learn that aspect of things, which is why I always say yes to podcasts, because this is a medium that gets us out to people that maybe wouldn't have listened to us or known who we were before. So yeah, trying to make it as connected to your life already. That way it's a part of your living. That's what I think. Yeah.
And again, with this question, because I gotta say, because I also don't, I don't believe in like I don't believe like a black and white point of, like, or it's either one or the other.
Yeah.
It was more of a like, was like the gray, what's your like sort of like gray area, and it sounds amazing. But from the things that you said, and I think the biggest thing, or like the one that hit me the most is more of a, well, you find yours, you kind of like gotta stick with it. And I think I found. Because I remember sometimes, maybe like a year ago, I would like wake up and sit down for like 2 hours or like an hour or so and just think, oh, I need content, I need to do something, I need to
Mhm.
do X, Y, Z. Well, now, because I have the energy and I write some like sketches and I have some ideas and etc. But I don't have either the knowledge or the material. I just use again my stand up, because I found this, and I don't know about I can reuse my joke, just because usually when I cut the clips, you don't know in what order it is.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you see a punchline, but then also like the way I usually cut my clips, which is quite funny, because I get a lot of people commenting saying, "Oh, you cut halfway through the bit," and I don't reply saying, "But the truth is, I know."
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm not giving you everything. I still need you to come to me to see some of it. Like, that's the other tricky thing. You can't put everything out there right away. Otherwise, you got nothing to like give them, which also does put a little fire under our butts to like be creating, be creating, be creating. But we can't create without taking some time to put back into the well. That's how I think. The artist, you can only put out so much, then you need some time to like put back in. So yeah, I think everyone's line of finding that is their own. But I've seen a lot of people burn out because like there's such a focus on like media, content. And you're like, okay, but like you also have to be living a life and then doing live performances. And so everyone's finding that place is going to be different. We're in the Wild West right now in regards to social media, I still think, right? It's like, pew, pew, do it. You can find your own way. It's a lot of trial and error, but yeah.
Yeah, that's another way of, I look at it sometimes. Oh, it's a new thing. It's still a baby. I feel
Mhm.
like we are, in some aspects, we are the trial generation
We
of all this.
absolutely look, my generation, I still remember being in school without computers. So it's like, we are a but how exciting and how wonderful is that we get to see that. We get to know the difference. Generations moving forward will never know the difference, right? Social media and all this online stuff, that is the way that they will exist now. Like dating apps. Like I did a bit of dating apps, but not really. Like all my dating and being with people was from real life or bumping into them or meeting them at a bar. But now that's so foreign to young people that you're like, wow. So life changes things, but like human behavior is also cyclical. Watch, maybe in 10 years people will be like shunning social media, like who knows, right? So
Well, that's
yeah.
what I was saying, because with the dating apps now, you see, and I've got someone. The episode is actually going to be out just a couple of weeks before yours, but before the one with you. But basically, one of my friends, Christine, who's a fellow borderline personality disorder person, she's in the process of like writing a book about dating apps, and how dating apps are actually losing clientele So
Yeah.
it's quite interesting because you see, it was a peak of it, and now it's a down.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had such a nice time speaking to you, and I feel like this could have gone for much longer. But I'm very, I feel very fortunate for you to have taken the time as it is to be a part of this. So I really appreciate you. Now, is there anything you want to say? Where do people find you? If
Yeah.
for anyone
See,
listening.
we do the plugging. This is the social media plug, everyone. So my full name is Allyson June Smith. I think on Insta I'm Allyson J, but if you just put in Allyson June Smith, Canadian comedian, all of my social media things will come up. Like I said, I am doing my very first tour in the UK. I keep adding dates because I'm just kind of anywhere where I can add in, I'm going. So my website will always have that information. But yeah, Allyson June Smith is my name. Allyson June Smith is my name. Please, that's what you need to remember. Seek me out. Um, yeah, the podcast that I have, Women Talking Bollocks, with Jen Brister and Maureen Younger, that comes out every Friday. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on all of the platforms, and that's really fun. And I have really enjoyed that process because I get to give advice. I have like an agony aunt, which I love. I've always wanted to be an advice giver so I can avoid my own problems. It's true. If I can give someone else it's easier to take care of other people's problems than it is our own. And then I also talk a bit about horror movies on that as well. So like, I love doing that. So those are the main places you can find me. But if you
And
see me and you want to come see a live show, please do. Please do.
what's the name of the horror movie podcast?
Oh, Horror Motel.
Horror Motel.
Yeah, and
Yes,
it's with
perfect.
Bunny Galore, who is a fabulous drag queen. But this is fun for Martin because Martin, yeah, it's Bunny, but he is Martin on this. So this is really nice for him too because it's been a real joy to do. Yeah, that one is a little bit more on and off. WTB comes out every week. Horror Motel. We're going to start our third season, I think, in the next month here. But we've got stuff out there, so you can go listen to the old stuff if you're a horror movie fan. Yeah.
Well, Alison, thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me come on and blab about comedy and my opinions. And yeah,
Oh
thank
no,
you
you.
very much.
How was it? Did you enjoy it? Was it what you hoped for? Was it better? I hope it was better, or at least what you hoped for. Because listening back to some of the bits in the episode, to when I put it together, I actually re remembered how great it felt recording it in the first place. So I hope you had a good time, and yeah, we'll catch up later. Check out Allison's social media is going to be in the bio of the podcast. My social media is in the bio of the podcast, and yeah, stay posted, because if you are based around London for the time being, that's what it looks like. I'm mostly gigging. Then you'll get my gig my show updates soon. And then in regards to Allison's show updates, as we talked about, she's touring. She's doing a few different places around UK, and so yeah, check that out, and go see her. She's fun, and yeah, we had a great time. Now, until later this week or whenever the next episode comes out, stay skillful. Bye.